Right. Hello, welcome to Talking Shop at Hangar 6. My name is Sam Durrani. I'm the shop manager at Hangar 6. And today we have a special guest, Ricky Spero, CEO of Redbud Labs. Ricky, thank you very much for joining us today.
You bet.
And for making the time to talk about your experiences as an entrepreneur and getting Redbud started. We actually have questions that were submitted early, so I thought we'd go ahead and start with those. But as a reminder to all of our watchers, you are welcome to submit questions directly via YouTube Live through the chat feature, and we will get to those as quickly as they come in. Right, let's get started. Ricky, thank you again for joining us. And I guess what I'd like to start with is tell us a little bit about your path to entrepreneurship. Have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur rather? And explain to me kind of what opportunities you found and what that brought you to where you are.
Yeah, so I was a student at UNC. I moved down to North Carolina to do my PhD in physics at Carolina with Rich Superfine, who was a professor in the physics department. Yeah, I guess the path to entrepreneurship, so Rich's lab had developed all this really cool technology, mostly for scientific instrumentation, different, new tools to do interesting kinds of measurements. So they were doing things like stretching individual strands of DNA with some of the tools that they'd built. My PhD was looking at how little things move through blood clots. And Rich, as I was finishing up my PhD, Rich said, we've been filing these patents, and I'd like to start a company. And I said, cool, I'd like to be in the room.
Yeah.
And so we went through a lot of the programs at UNC. UNC has great resources for faculty that want to start new companies, and we went through a lot of those programs. And one thing led to another. We formed the company, and here I am.
All right. All right. Can you tell me a little bit more about those programs? Like, were there hurdles involved in becoming a spin-out from a university?
So the UNC has lots of programs, and they've changed a lot since we went through them. They had a course called Launch the Venture that we took. There's an organization within UNC that's now called Kickstart Venture Services that does a lot of kind of networking. So if you're starting a company, they'll help you find people to go talk to, and kind of that's the nucleation site for people outside of the university that are interested in startups coming out. So there's some little buckets of funding that you can get access to for various early stage things that need to happen. And so there were a lot of people around to give us advice and to coach us through some of the early steps and introduce us to the Triangle startup community. So that was, UNC, certainly when we were starting, was really proactive in looking for ways to support new companies.
All right. And tell me a little bit about kind of the beginnings of Redbud. I guess, first of all, where did the name come from?
Yeah, so
that's always interesting to know.
Yeah, the name, originally the name was Rheomics, which it's RHEOMICS, which is a great description of kind of the underlying technical opportunity that we saw. The RHEO, Rio, refers to the science of flow, and it turns out our technology is a microfluidic technology. It's a microfluidic or fluid processing technology. The biggest issue was that we realized that we were going to have to go out to conferences, and people were going to have to, we're going to have to tell people our email address or our company name. They're going to have to go Google it later.
Yeah.
And it was tough to spell and tough to remember. And so the Redbud is a local tree. We've all seen these trees, purple blossoms that bloom, or they're about to start right now.
Yeah.
beautiful local trees, regional trees, and so it's just a nice kind of reference point for where we are. And
I like that.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that you guys were on UNC's campus for a little while, and and you recently transitioned to the Frontier.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. And you've obviously, or for those that don't know, Redbud Labs is a member at Hangar 6. They're actually one of the oldest members. I remember when your director of the biomedical engineering, Brittany Mason, came by when I first opened my doors. She was actually
waiting outside, probably.
my second member, the second member
Yeah.
at Hangar 6 to join. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the experience that you've had with Hangar 6, kind of from your side as a member versus my side? I know I've worked on quite a few projects with you guys, and definitely a lot of 3D printing over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for what we do, rapid prototyping it's as important a resource for us as funding. Mm-hmm. And IP. It's like we need access to rapid prototyping in order to do what we do. So our Redbud Labs has been a component vendor. So we make chips that go into like diagnostic consumables. Mm-hmm. And so we need to do a lot of prototyping of the kinds of assemblies that our stuff is going to go into. And a lot of that is high resolution SLA. Ultimately the parts that our chip would go into are injection molded. Mm-hmm. But the economics, a lot of folks already know, the economics of injection molding don't tend to work very well at prototype stage.
Yes.
And so we have to do rapid prototypes, and we really have to do high resolution SLA. And the only way to do that is you buy the printers yourself. It's amazing what's out there and what you can buy and how the costs have come down.
Yeah.
But then you have to maintain it. You got to have someone that's sitting on top of the piece of equipment all the time. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that internally what we were spending our time doing was design engineering, and so the only other way to do it is you order out for parts, and the good resources to order out parts take weeks to get parts back often. Yeah. Sometimes you can get turnarounds in like a week. But if you want to go in and just try 5 different things, mm-hmm. it's really important to have access to the tools yourself. And so, we're in here, Brittany's in here, and the other folks on our systems team are in here all the time, because mm-hmm. it is by far the fastest way to just get from the starting point to a good idea. And the only way you do that is you build, test, build, test, build, test.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, that's really what we're about here, is trying to, one of those hurdles is time. So we do try to get things turned around incredibly fast for members. And whenever we find bottlenecks, we find the resources to get additional equipment to actually deal with those bottlenecks, to make sure things are getting turned around in real time as often as possible. And it looks like we have a question that's come in from Sam Fox, Seneca Devices. Dan?
It asks, what does your prototyping/design iteration cycle look like for microfluidic prototypes? What takes the longest, and what is the biggest challenge for building prototypes?
So it's a good question. So we do, first of all, we use Onshape for our CAD platform, mm-hmm. Which I've been really impressed with.
Me too.
Typically what we'll do is we'll try to get the kind of basic ideas, the design motifs that need to go into the part. We'll get those figured out with the form, right? Which is kind of medium resolution SLA platform. And we basically don't use FDM. We'll use FDM for coarse parts. But for all the fluidic parts, we will typically use either the form for the early stuff, or we can do laser cut laminates. So you take an adhesive layer, you cut the sidewalls into it, so that's kind of your middle layer, and then you put a ceiling and a floor on it. And you can cut vents in the top so you can get fluid through the chambers. So those are kind of the two good buckets for us. Once we've got the feel of what the part should look like, a lot of times we want a high resolution SLA part, and often we'll order out for those. We'll actually go to one of the ordering sites that uses one of these $40,000 super high resolution things, and they can clear coat the parts so that they're transparent, right? So you can get a much better understanding of what a final production part might look and operate like. And then the following stage is to start thinking about injection molding, at least in our field, where you're thinking about injection molding consumables. You want your plastic parts to be dimes typically, less than that if you can. And so for the really rapid turn stuff where you need to go through multiple iterations, the forms are great for that.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's get back to a little bit about what Redbud is doing right now. So would you consider Redbud still in the R&D stage currently, or I know you mentioned that you do produce components for other equipment out there currently, but how would you really define where Redbud is as an entity, kind of on the timeline of?
Yeah, God, I hope we're always in the R&D stage. If we're ever not, you got to take me out back and put me out of my misery. No, that's the fun part. So you're if the company's any fun, you're always building new stuff, right? You're always developing new stuff. I think what we've seen is that the further along we get, the more we have to worry about the other parts of the organization, right? When you're starting, it's brand new technology, right? You're just worried that the technology itself is going to break. And I think of us as building on the ops part. We make our own novel material. That's kind of the core intellectual property at Redbud. And so building out the manufacturing for that, we got our ISO certification last year. That was a big step forward for us. And building out the commercial infrastructure is this other thing that you build on top. But I think if it was ever not being driven by this imperative to build something really great and to build on what we've already built to build something even greater, then it's as soon as we're not doing that, it's no fun.
I agree, absolutely. Okay, well, the other side of the business is obviously the funding. How do you get that great idea and that research to actually sustain itself? Can you tell us a little bit about what Redbud's gone through, and kind of where you are and how you were funded?
Yeah, so we've leaned really heavily on non-dilutive funding.
Okay.
So we've done a lot of the SBIR program through NIH, some from NSF as well. Our technology was still pretty rough when we started, and there was a lot of development work to do, and I think if we had gone out and gotten a bunch of venture capital at that stage, we probably would have gotten ourselves in trouble because there was still a lot of homework left to do. Arguably, it could have stayed in the university for a few more years before we started, but what we did, I don't think is unusual in town. I think a lot of companies in this town do this. I think we're unusual because we're very upfront about it. We've been proactive on non-dilutive funding. We've been successful at it. My co-founders had research grants and knew how to write NIH grants, and we built up some infrastructure to do that successfully within Redbud. And now as we mature, we're getting in a better position to go out and raise more equity financing. So we've done a little bit, but it takes time to put together a venture fundable story and to have the technology and the product lined up in a way that the story you're telling is venture fundable, that it makes sense for venture investors.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is get yourself in a situation where you're telling a group of people a story they need to hear for it to make sense for their venture business or their investment business, but it doesn't actually match the state of your technology and the reality of the company you're building. So one of the ways that we were able to not get ourselves in that situation was these research grants.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, building on that, where do you kind of see Redbud, say 5 years from now? You know, is it? Do you hope to eventually grow and go public and kind of become that kind of company? What is the future looking like, or what do you hope it looks like for Redbud?
You know, what we said at the beginning was we want to see the technology have an impact in the world.
Right.
That was the motivation, right?
Yeah.
You're working in a research lab, you develop really cool new stuff, and the incentives on the university side are great. You showed me something new, now go show me something else that's new, right? Mm-hmm. So you never get to kind of finish the thing that you started.
Yeah.
And if what you want to do is learn new things about nature, that imperative is great. It means that's the right place to be, is in that academic context. Mm-hmm. If what you want to do is create something new and use it to make people happy, right, to have an impact in the world, companies are a better place to do that. And so, you know, that's what we want to accomplish. As long as we feel like we're headed down that road, I think we're in a good place. Sometimes the best way to do that is you build the company yourself. Sometimes the best way to do it is you build it with investors, and sometimes the best way to do it is you sell the company to someone else.
Yeah.
We've always been pretty open-minded about where we end up. Mm-hmm. What we want to do is see the technology have an impact.
All right. That's pretty great. How large is your team currently at Redbud?
Whoops. There we go.
No problem.
We are 18 right now. Yeah, full time.
All right. That's awesome. And I guess that's a good transition to the other question. This is something that we've seen come in, and I've heard it here multiple times before. You know, as the company grows, there's a lot of IP and processes that are created, and really managing that and creating documentation is just a separate problem all on its own. How's Redbud kind of handled that and sort of taking control of that process so it doesn't just completely become overwhelming?
Yeah. So, you know, you have to, in any operational area of a business, when you're small, you don't have the resources to do everything that you might hope to do. Mm-hmm. And so it's always, we talk a lot about setting priorities. What's the most important thing? You know, is if I have a choice between writing this thing down or going and building the next thing, what's more important? And we go through this exercise in a very formal way at Redbud. We set annual goals and we set quarterly goals. We meet weekly to talk about how we're working against priorities as a whole company. And we actually divide those goals into 3 big buckets, which are survive, grow, and invest.
All right.
So survive is cash in, right? Can we keep the lights on? Grow is, what are the markers of traction, of commercial progress? What are the things that drive the stock price? Right? There are various ways you can phrase it, but it's all how do we measure, or how will we demonstrate progress? And then the third bucket is invest. Those are the things that you have to do if it works, right? If you're successful and you haven't gotten your production process to be reliable, you're going to be in trouble. So you need to make investments along the way to be ready for success. Intellectual property is basically always in that third bucket. And that third bucket is almost always the one that gets the least attention, because it's almost by definition the least important, because it only matters if you're successful. But you always have to go back to the things in that invest bucket. So ISO certification was in that bucket for us, right? No one cares if we're ISO certified if the company fails, right?
Right.
But if it succeeds, it's really important. And so you have to meter out those investments in a thoughtful way as you go along, so that they don't all come due at the last second. So in our case, it's absolutely critical that we have patents. Patents are expensive, and they involve a lot of work, and you need a lot of expertise. So we have invested, and we continue to invest a lot in an intellectual property team, right? Attorneys that know IP strategy, that can write the patents, right? We have a whole process for how we capture inventions and how we get the stuff protected. We have trade secret because we manufacture our own stuff, so we have to be really proactive about that. We have trainings once a year where we, actually more than that, every time we have new employees, we got to do a trade secret training. So in our case, we invest in it heavily because it's core to the business. Obviously, the nature of the investment and the importance of that investment against the others that you have time or resources to set aside for, that's a judgment that you have to make kind of depending on the organization. But I think the general principle for us has been, let's at least be mindful of what investments we should be making, and let's do our best to work against that list to the extent that our resources allow.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a useful answer, but that's
No, that makes sense. Is there, just to tack on a little bit onto that question, are there established processes or documenting software that's out there that's available for IP documentation processes, etc., or is it something that you've just created internally and it works for Redbud and meeting its goals?
If it's out there, I'm sure it's designed for huge companies, and it's way too expensive. I mean, SAP probably has something for that.
Sure.
So what we did was we hired the right people. So we actually work with a specialty firm where the principal, guy named Bill Barrett, is just masterful at process for this stuff. His firm is called Technomos. And I can't say enough good things about the work that they do, but I will say this is an area where, like, for the software folks, like, there's absolutely a SaaS product. In process engineering this stuff for
there's definitely
small to medium companies.
I mean, I have some members who just basically use glorified spreadsheets. And they throw everything into there to keep everything organized, and others that is just series of folders, and some that just have everything saved directly in their CAD. It's really kind of all over the place, and nothing really is an ideal system yet. So I'm just kind of curious how Redbud
that's right, and I
solved that problem.
I mean, whether it's a bolt-on to Onshape, something that you can like catch versions and like make notes on inventions. There's all kinds of businesses. You can also imagine it as like something that interfaces with a LIMS, right? Where as people are taking data, they can kind of make notes on and even submit invention reports. I'd love to see something like that.
I would too, actually.
But the short answer is we do it with like Google Forms and spreadsheets and
same here. That's kind of how I handle things here for now. It's difficult, definitely. Let's see. Any other questions have come in, Dan? All right. Okay. I think so. We're getting close to the end right now. I just thought maybe we could finish off with kind of cliche, but what is possibly your most valuable piece of advice that you can share with our young entrepreneurs out there, people who are just getting started, or some that have been in the game for a while, but obviously could still benefit. It's It's a big question, obviously. Yeah.
Well, I one of my personal rules is I don't give startup advice.
Okay.
And the reason is every company is completely different,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And everybody's needs are different. And there are a lot of people out there who write really good stuff about startup.
Mm-hmm.
And they've thought a lot about it, and they write well.
Yeah.
The biggest problem, of course, is that there are so many of them that the hard part is figuring out who to listen to,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually maybe the right point to land on, which
Mm-hmm.
is I was told early on that the mark of a good founder is that you pick the right people to listen to. You go to start a company and you get advice from everybody about everything. And a really good founder, entrepreneur, startup CEO will go solicit all of that advice from all of the people, right? But the skill is in, or the judgment is in picking who to listen to about which things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the person who gives you really good advice on financing may not give you good advice on product strategy, and the person who gives you good product strategy advice may not give you good marketing advice. And it rolls into a skill ultimately of building a team, finding the right people in the right roles, putting the right players in the right positions on the field,
Mm-hmm.
both inside and outside of the organization. And so get a lot of advice and then pick who to listen to carefully.
All right. That's great. Well, I think that's a great place to end our segment today. Thank you, everyone, again for joining. And thank you, Ricky Spero, CEO of Redbud Labs, for being our guest today. And we'll see you again next month for another episode of Talking Shop at Hangar 6. Thank you very much. Take care.